of the sayings attributed to Jesus that is used often, I use it quite a bit, is, "You shall know the truth, and the truth will make you free." And we all respond to that because we love the idea of freedom. But I have thought often, what is the meaning of freedom? What did he mean by freedom? Set us free from what? He didn't explain what he meant by truth, so I think we have to come to that understanding ourselves. What is the truth that sets us free? But what is freedom? What is the freedom he's talking about? And I've wondered, is it freedom from human limitation? You know, I'm here on this planet, I have a body, it has needs. Would I be free to start flying, or free to become a breatharian where I don't have to eat food or have shelter or do all of the things that are required to maintain the body? Is it that type of freedom? So I think when you really think about it, the thing he was talking about is you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free from fear. And fear is one of the most debilitating emotions that we could possibly experience, and all of us know it quite well. We're all quite familiar with fear. And it's not the kind of fear, as I've talked about before, of you're out camping and you hear a bear growling outside of your tent. You're probably going to be a little bit nervous about that, and maybe terrified. And that's sort of a self-preservation thing. It's a different kind of fear. I'm talking about that kind of fear that you carry throughout your day for no particular reason. Just a sense that things aren't working so well, or something might collapse at some point, or we may not even be able to define why we carry it. But it is the result of seeing ourselves as something less than we are, as seeing ourselves only as a physical being, and with all the restrictions that that implies. And so to know the truth would be that awareness of ourselves as a spiritual being, because as we tap that deeper level, we naturally rise above fear. And it's not that we do it all in one fell swoop, that we have moments of pure insight that we fear nothing, and then we can drop back down to that state of self-definition that causes us to fear again. We just may have something in front of us that we don't know how to handle, and we're looking at that and responding in fear. So this story, I always think every year about what Palm Sunday means, and I usually come back to this idea that Palm Sunday focuses on the story of Jesus entering Jerusalem at the end of his ministry in the Synoptic Gospels. He does so on the unridden colt of a donkey. The foreshadowing provided in the gospel narrative indicates that Jesus knew his fate and that he was committed to it. We know from the story that his death was not his end, but a step to something much grander. Now also keep in mind that Mark, who carried this story first gospel written, was written about 40 years after Jesus' death. And just try to put that in perspective. You know, think of what your life, what you were doing 40 years ago. That's quite a span of time, especially when there are no newspapers, there's no internet, there's no real written source of communication between average people, between normal people. So that's a long time to have passed for Mark then to begin writing. But he's writing after the fact, in other words. He's looking at the stories that have been passed to him, and naturally he could put Jesus in a position where he would foreshadow his own, he would understand his own death was forthcoming. So we have to keep that in mind. It's a very important aspect of reading stories from the Bible is they're always written after the fact. And so anytime there is a foreshadowing or prophecy of any kind, you know the person doing the writing already knows what's happened. And so that makes a big difference on how we think of it when we're reading it. It's just an important thing to understand. And that's also why the gospel writers would differ in the way they report the story. It depended on what they wanted to say. They often invent their own meaning to what it is that is being said and how a story is being used. You know, sometimes Jesus is addressing Pharisees, sometimes he's addressing his disciples with the same story. So who is he addressing, you know, historically speaking? And the way you answer that is the gospel writers use different contexts to address these things. They had similar material that they drew from, but they used it in different ways, and so that will explain some of these things. So according to the story, the people cheered and spread garments and palm branches on the road as a show of support, and that's why we call it Palm Sunday, the triumphal entry, it's also called. Yet a few days later, those same supporters would call for his death. Jesus was very much alone in his final phase of his earthly ministry. So that's why I always come around to using the idea of confronting fear. Because if you think about, as the story is told, he would be going into Jerusalem knowing that he wouldn't come out alive, knowing the chances were good that he would not come out alive. And again, just think of this, not necessarily him, the man, that knew this. He may very well have known it, because one of the things that people were calling him was the Son of God. And that was a crime punishable by death, because there was only one Son of God, and that was Caesar. And on the coins that they had and so on, Caesar's depicted as the Son of God. So if you would equate yourself to that, it was punishable by death. They didn't mess around, those Romans. And so Jesus may very well have known from what was circulating around him, from some things he even said, that if he was known and found out, you know, that these things were being said of him, that would be considered a threat. Not an actual threat to the Roman Empire, but he would be used as an example. You don't call yourself or have people call you a son of God and get away with it. That's just not going to happen, you know, under Roman rule. So it's important to know some of those little things. And of course, when this story first appeared, as I pointed out, Jerusalem was under attack by the Romans. They had battering rams at the gates. They eventually broke down the gates. They slaughtered all the people they could. Thousands of Jews died. Thousands of Romans died too, actually. And they went in and burned down the temple. And to understand how tragic that was, the Jewish community, the entire Jewish world considered Jerusalem and the temple the center of the universe. Literally, the place where heaven and earth met. There were many synagogues, and they would call these temples sometimes, but there was really only one temple. And by the time Mark was written, or during the time when Mark appeared, the temple had been destroyed. And just try to imagine, if you're familiar at all with the Unity movement, Unity Village and all of that, if that place was leveled, you know, at some point. It would even be worse than that, because most of us don't have the same connection to that headquarters as the Jews would have to the temple. But that's going on, and so Jesus is taking this huge risk, riding into Jerusalem, And this would have been, it's depicted as before the temple was destroyed, because he'll talk about that. He'll predict that. The disciples say, look at all these beautiful stones, and he'll say there's not going to be a stone left unturned. Well, Mark would have known that that was true. There would not have been a stone left unturned, because they totally leveled it. So what do we learn from this? Jesus is making this decision, and we're going by the story. He's making the decision knowing that he's going to be killed. But he's making the decision to come in and, in a sense, make a statement. He goes in, he overturns the money changers in the temple, and throws all those people out. And that in itself probably would have been punishable by death. It would have gotten him in some pretty hot water. But the fact is, when Mark wrote this, that had all probably already happened. But Jesus is seeing this. He's perceiving this is all going to unfold. So he goes in, he cleanses the temple, it's called. And that gets everybody's attention. And he's arrested and goes before Pilate. And you know the story there, that Pilate asked him if he considers himself a king, and he says, well, that's what you call me. But he ends up saying, for this reason, for this purpose I was born, to bear witness to the truth. And that to me is one of the surviving mystical threads, very important, because he's there to bear witness to the truth of his spiritual identity. Same truth as you and I are here to bear witness to. And that's why we were born, to bear witness to the truth. To be true to ourselves, in other words. But the story is about conviction and the absolute courage to uphold it. It isn't likely that any of us will be confronted with the threat of death for our beliefs. Let's hope that's not true, or that is true. We are, however, confronted with the fear of death, fear of change, fear of the unknown, or fear for no reason at all. So fear is one of the most debilitating emotions that we can harbor. So that's what I think it is. That's the message I get from this story, is knowing what he knew, he did it anyway. And that's confronting your fear, like at a level that most of us will never have to deal with. But it's still the same thing. And does it matter if it's an imagined fear or if it's a real threat? I think the imagined fears take a bigger toll on our health than real threats. How many times have we been afraid of something that was not true, something that did not happen? But your body has the same reaction to it, and your thinking has the same reaction to it, whether it's true or not. I've talked about the bear under the bed syndrome. Were any of you afraid of the monster under the bed when you were growing up? How many monsters were actually under your bed? Not too many. Does that matter? When you're that little kid laying in your bed and you think there's something under your bed, there might as well be. It might as well be real, because you're having the same reaction to it. And how much of that carries over into just daily life, the things that we fear? Just running beneath kind of the surface of our consciousness. A fear that's based on what? Bear under the bed? That's kind of what most of it is. And what's interesting too is when you actually have a problem, and I'm speaking for all of us here, when we have a problem, we will always work through it. If you hadn't worked through every problem that you've ever had, you wouldn't probably be here today. You survived it all. You worked through it somehow. And we can't see how we're going to do it when we're in the midst of it. That's why we're afraid. We don't think we have the ability to get through. But so often we thought, there's no way that we can handle this, or I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to get through this. And so we react in fear. It has become kind of a natural thing. And I think the more open we are to our spiritual level, the less that fear is a knee-jerk reaction. I think that's the point. That's when we're set free, is the more we understand ourselves as a spiritual being. Because what if you really grasp the idea, say your life is not so good at this moment, but you grasp the idea that your soul is eternal, that it has been in a place like this countless times, and you've walked through every one of them, you've come to this point, your soul is untouchable by what's going on outside of your body. And that's not to act like the problem is not there. That's not denial. It's not sticking your head in the sand in that sense. But what if you could realize in the midst of the crisis that you're involved in that this is just one small portion of your eternal life? You know, it helps us get a broader perspective. It helps us to take a deep breath and perhaps find the strength we need to walk through the thing that we're involved in. And that's knowing the truth. It's suddenly letting the mind go to this larger context. I am a spiritual being, having this human experience, not a human being thinking about my spirituality. I am a spiritual being, and I'm here in this body having this earthly experience, and so much of my thought is stuck on that. This is me. This is my life. This is my pain. This is the thing I fear. And so what if we just stepped back, took that deep breath, and said, you know, I'm much greater than this. I'm bigger than this. There's more to me than this. This too shall pass. Very good affirmation. This too shall pass. Where does fear come from? It comes from inaction. And by that I mean it comes from inaction, mental and emotional inaction. It rises in us over some situation and we consider it a natural part of who we are. It's natural to be afraid. Our focus is usually on the thing that sparks fear, not fear itself. So when I say inaction, we're looking at this thing that's causing us to quake in our boots. That's the thing that's making me afraid. What we're not looking at is the me that's reacting this way. Why am I reacting in fear? Why do I think I don't have what it takes to get through this? Why do I think I don't have what it takes to deal with this appearance? That's the inaction. We're looking at the thing outside of ourselves, not at fear itself, at the source of fear itself. And fear comes from a definition of ourselves that is not true. It doesn't encompass the whole of what we are. That is, the spiritual being having the human experience. And these are not just words. You can actually prove this to yourself if you're going through this, and I'm sure you've done this many times. Some things are easier to handle than others. We know that. But the bottom line is we are a spiritual being, and we are greater than anything that we fear. And the trick is to connect with that part of us that is greater than the thing we fear. So the inaction is failing to make that connection. We're not taking the action to make that connection. That's our failure to act. We're saying fear's natural, this is the thing I'm afraid of, and I'm just having a natural reaction. That's part of our definition, our self-definition. I'm a human being having this experience, rather than a spiritual being who is having a human experience. It's just a shift of perception. And it is important for us, if we are serious about this whole spiritual thing, what it means, what it can do for us, then we'll take the situation that scares us most, if it's going on at the moment, and say, what is this self that's reacting? to this. Why am I doing that? Why am I dropping down into a level of myself that does not represent this larger picture, this larger self? Why am I focusing on that thing outside there and thinking that my reaction is simply the normal reactions, the reaction everybody would have? And that's probably true. Anyone you talk to will say, well, you have every right in the world to be afraid. But if you talk to a person like Jesus, he would say, you can do that, but you don't have to. You can know the truth that'll set you free from your fear. There's another way to look at things. So that's what we're challenged with in our life, and I think that's what I see driving him in that story is he saw the bigger picture. And what is the bigger picture? His physical body was put to death, but was he? And that's the whole Easter story. We'll talk about that next week. But actually, he was set free to become something more. And what's interesting too is the whole Christian movement itself became more as the result of that. Where it was a tiny community of people, probably in his day, developed into one of the largest movements on the planet. And I'm not saying that it's in total agreement with what he taught. I think there's some discrepancy there. But still, it's the same idea. It's dropping a seed in the ground and that seed dies. Something dies. The consciousness that is that seed dies to the seed self so something more can come out. That's the principle. And we're seeing it all around us right now. But trees are budding and things are popping out of the ground and the birds are sounding a little bit different. You can just tell that new life is coming forth. We know that happens. And we're part of that process. So how do we confront fear? Let's see, yeah. In stillness, we release that part of us that is afraid. We recognize that this fearful self is not the real spiritual essence that we are. We want to die to this self like the seed that dies to become the greater plant. One of the hardest things to do with this spiritual teaching is to try to be still when you're afraid. You ever done that? It's the last thing in the world you want to do. I don't want to be still. I want to destroy something. I want to destroy that problem. That's the hardest thing to do because we're so used to thinking action. We got to take action against this thing. So as we move into spiritual understanding, we start to realize that stillness is action. As a matter of fact, it's the greatest action we can take. To just take time to let go, to be still and let go. And let this spiritual dimension rise up in our awareness again. And that is difficult to let go because we're afraid to let go. It's fear again. I don't want to let go. My world will collapse if I let go. And yes, it will. The world that you're afraid of will be made known to you. That there is nothing to fear. That the thing you fear is seeing life from a lower level than you're capable of seeing it from. So stillness is not an inaction. It is a letting go of this whole scene that's going on, this whole reaction that you're having. And you can do this through affirmation, and we'll share one here in a minute. Through speaking words, through getting your attention focused on the now moment and on the greater movement. You know, the seed dropped in the ground. Do you think if you were a seed dropped in the ground, that would be a pleasant experience? You live your life as a seed, that's how everybody knows you. And suddenly, somebody drops you in the ground and covers you up. Seems like just the opposite. But that seed becomes very still. And from that stillness, something else begins to emerge. That is the potential in the seed. And that's the whole idea. Meditation, stillness, is dropping yourself in that soil and just letting life go for a while and letting something greater emerge. And the way this usually manifests, for me anyway, is I'll sit down to be still and just have maybe a brief sense that everything's going to be okay. Everything's working out. I don't know how. That just may hit, and then it may be very fleeting. So I'll go about my business, and then I'll come back later and do it again. When the fear builds up, you do it again. You touch that part of yourself, and the way always opens. That's what's amazing about it. It always opens. But we don't even need to think from that point of view. If you can be in a situation that normally scares you and you don't experience fear, you're making progress. And that's kind of the school room of this planet. Helps teach us how to do that. So we've got some affirmations here. I was not given a spirit of fear. I now let go of this false self, this shadow of the powerful spiritual being that I am. I am confident, I am fearless, I am at peace. Let's take this one sentence at a time. I was not given a spirit of fear. Let's say that together. I was not given a spirit of fear. I now let go of this false self, this shadow of the powerful spiritual being that I am. Let's say that. I now let go of this false self, this shadow of the powerful spiritual being that I am. I am confident, I am fearless, I am at peace. Let's say that. I am confident, I am fearless, I am at peace. If you just look at each of these lines, what it's saying, and this is what you're after in the stillness. You're not trying to just stop your brain, stop your mind. You want to focus on what is true. You were not given a spirit of fear. You close your eyes to be still. This is where you start. I wasn't given a spirit of fear. I'm afraid. So this is not who I am. And it's kind of let's look at that and let it go. I now let go of this false self, this shadow of the powerful spiritual being that I am. So I actually release that quivering, fearful self, where I'm no longer feeling that fear. I'm confident, I'm fearless, and I'm at peace. It's a cycle that when you reach that last line, I'm at peace, you can rest in that peace for a while, but that's when you get up and go about your business. When you actually reach that place where you're okay, you don't have to have the answer to be okay. You just know it's coming forth. So that's how affirmation works. It's a movement of the mind, and when we say silence and the stillness, that's establishing yourself in what is true at the spiritual level. When fear arises, do not give it the opportunity to dominate your emotional state. Easier said than done, but that's what we're after. Confront this fear until you put it behind you. That's what this teaching is about. Unity was called practical Christianity, and that's why. Because you've got a problem, you should be able to apply the principles you know to deal with that problem and to change the way you feel about yourself and about your life in that given moment. Okay? That's what we're about, dealing with real life. All right, thanks for coming out. Happy Palm Sunday, and we'll look forward to seeing you and resurrecting with you next week.
You've been watching a talk given by Reverend Doug Bottorff here at Independent Unity in beautiful Grand Junction, Colorado. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. It really helps us spread our message. If you would like to support us, you can do so by clicking the button in the right-hand corner of the video screen. We greatly appreciate your support. Thanks again for watching.